Are we living in a computer simulation? Is reality as we know it fabricated within a machine designed by some sort of higher intelligence? Probably not, but apparently, if you take common creationist arguments, you can come to that conclusion.
I know of no one who has ever made this claim before, but I rather suspect that my experience is not unique. What perhaps is unique is the fact that I am willing to talk about it. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed.
Okay, so the clip that was just shown was of a man named Philip K. Dick, and the way the maker of this video speaks, you might think that he's some sort of scientist. So what branch of science do you think he's in? What do you think his doctorate is in? No. The answer is no. He's not a scientist, he is a science fiction writer. So to get our information from him is kind of like getting our information from L. Ron Hubbard. You want somebody who's better at living in reality than in science fiction.
Since the 1970s, scientists have been asking themselves, do we live in a simulation? Are we living in a computer program? And the reason that they're asking themselves these questions is because the more we know about our universe, about life, the less random it appears to be.
I don't see any indication that there are loads of scientists that think that we are in computer simulations. This is a philosophical question more than a scientific one, because we can't necessarily test this. And you remember Philip K. Dick that we talked about earlier? He was known to delve into philosophical issues.
So I'm left with the puzzle of trying to figure out whether I live in the Matrix or not.
Wait, you're blowing my mind at this moment. So you're saying, are you saying your attempt to understand the fundamental operations of nature leads you to a set of equations that are indistinguishable from the equations that drive search engines and browsers on our computers?
That is correct. So
wait, I have to just be silent for a minute here.
When we ask the question...
Okay, wait, hold up, why'd you stop there? Well, yeah, he did say that he found equations that were similar to codes found in search engines. It doesn't actually indicate that they are codes. As they say later in the video that you conveniently left out.
And I admire that seriously, that's fine. That's another beautiful piece of mathematics that may be explanatory or descriptive of physics, but that all I'm objecting to is that doesn't mean that we live in the mathematics. That means the mathematics is just descriptive of an aspect of the universe.
When we ask the question, do we live in a matrix, what we're really asking here is, do we live in a random reality, in a reality that is the product of a random sequence of events, or do we live in a reality that has been constructed?
Okay, sure, that sounds fine to me, but the article that you just showed was not written by a scientist, but instead just some journalist who writes about a lot of science things. I can find no sort of qualifications or any sort of indication of what sort of education she had, so if this author really knows what she's talking about, who knows? But if you read the article, or at least skimmed over it like I did, you find that what she's saying is that because scientists are more and more able to simulate a universe, that means our universe is simulated. And it also goes on to say that simulations that we create do a certain thing, and we find in reality that that same thing is similar. But she fails to realize that these simulations we make are based off of reality and not the other way around. But to be completely honest, I didn't read through it all that thoroughly because quite frankly, I don't really care so much. And from here on out, in the video that I'm responding to, the visuals consist entirely of people narrowly avoiding traffic accidents, as well as a few minor corrections from what he's saying in the form of text. So I'm just going to cut that out, the visuals that is, because I find it distracting. And he never makes any sort of point about these narrow avoidances, so I'm not going to bring it up either.
Now, when we ask ourselves these types of questions, most of us settle on the explanation that we're given in school, that first there was a big bang and then there was evolution, and after millions of years, well, here we are. Everything being totally random.
That's an insanely oversimplified statement of what took years to learn in school. And it's not random. I can't think of any teacher who described the Big Bang, cosmology, abiogenesis, or evolution to be random. In fact, what I found in school was an explanation of these things, which I guess not all of us paid attention to.
We accept that without questioning any of the basic parts of that premise.
Actually, they explained the basic parts of these premises. They didn't go too much into the Big Bang, but I was explained in pretty good detail as to cosmology and Darwinian evolution.
Such as, where did the matter come from that supposedly Big Banged? Where did the energy come from to make things Big Bang?
So I see you don't understand the Big Bang. First, small little nitpick on semantics. I think you mean mass, not matter, because matter can be transformed into things that aren't considered matter. But mass stays constant. So where did the mass and energy come from that exists in the universe today? Nowhere. It didn't come from anywhere. It always existed, never began to exist. Even in the absence of space and time, mass and energy existed in the form of the initial singularity. And then, due to quantum fluctuations, space-time formed and then expanded mass and energy to the universe that we know today. Now, I didn't learn the Big Bang that in-depth in school, but if I really wanted to learn about this, which I did, all you have to do is look it up.
And perhaps what's even more perplexing here is, how did life evolve out of non-living components, given that nobody's ever seen that happen before?
Okay, first, another nitpick on semantics. Life didn't evolve out of non-living material. Life formed out of non-living material. And only after life formed can it evolve. But how do we know that abiogenesis actually happened when we haven't seen it happen? Actually, we have seen it happen. Look at the work of Sidney W. Fox. In his variation of the Miller-Urey experiment, he spontaneously formed what he called proteinoids, which were thought to be predecessors to proteins, and he also created what he called microspheres, which were protocells, and both of these things reproduced asexually. Technically, they weren't alive, depending on your definition, but the only thing needed to start Darwinian evolution is something to form that can replicate, and that can change as it replicates. And we've seen that happen better and better as we more closely understand the conditions of the early Earth.
In part 1 of our series, we looked at a law in science called the law of biogenesis, and how it's the most basic and fundamental law in biology, and how it says that it takes life to get life. That you can absolutely not get life from something that is not already alive. We've never seen it happen. We cannot do it in a lab. It cannot be done. Now, they don't call this the theory of biogenesis. They call it the law of biogenesis. And even though there's a law of biogenesis out there, they still teach people that the theory of evolution somehow explains the origins of life. Not only is that idea unfounded and scientifically impossible, it flies in the face of everything else we know about our physical world.
Okay, well, let's look up the law of biogenesis on Wikipedia. Well, that's kind of weird. The Wikipedia page isn't entitled The Law of Biogenesis, it's entitled Biogenesis, and it refers to it as a hypothesis, not a law and not a theory. And it defines it as the concept that modern life only arrives out of modern life, and was merely a refutation of spontaneous generation. And if you look up the law of biogenesis on Google, what you'll find is a lot of creationist websites, and people responding to creationists.
Take the laws of entropy, for example. These laws say that things in our universe go from order to disorder. It's why things go from beginning to end. It's why they break down over time. It's why we constantly have to clean up after ourselves. Things are constantly going from order to disorder unless there's a type of intelligent intervention.
Except that there's no law of thermodynamics that actually says that. What you're talking about is the second law of thermodynamics, which actually states that within a thermodynamically isolated system, the total amount of entropy can only decrease. And thermodynamic entropy is defined as the ability of energy to be converted into mechanical work. So basically, within an isolated system, energy will be less and less usable. And that has absolutely nothing to do with evolution, especially when you consider the fact that the Earth is far from an isolated system. as it receives low entropy energy from the sun. There's a reason why scientists don't see a contradiction here, whereas you do. It's because you don't understand what you're talking about.
In the natural world, in a totally random world, things go from order to disorder, not disorder to order. And this fact alone makes the idea of life evolving out of a random mechanism absolutely impossible.
Well, at least it would if there was no such thing as natural selection. That's what natural selection does. As organisms evolve, the organisms that are better fit to survive in their environment survive more, and they thrive more, they reproduce more. So we get animals that are better and better able to survive in their environment. Now, given the mechanisms of mutation, that very well can cause an increase in complexity.
Coupling that idea with the fact that we live on a Goldilocks planet where everything is just right leads us to the inevitable conclusion that we do in fact live in a constructed reality. Probability guarantees that.
Actually, it's not that difficult for a planet to randomly be just right to form and sustain life. Well, it would be difficult if you were to just track the lifetime of one particular randomly chosen planet. You probably wouldn't get life on it. But there are billions of planets within every galaxy, and there are billions of galaxies within the universe. And because of the sheer amount of planets, it's incredibly likely for there to be at least a few planets that can form and sustain life, even if that chance is very low for any one randomly chosen planet.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we see around us isn't about chance, it's about design. Therefore, everything around us is the way it is for a reason. Everything that happens for a reason. It's all part of a program governed by rules.
Well, what makes you think that? What makes you think that this is the best explanation? You find some things that you don't understand, and you jump to the conclusion that there's either a magic man who does it, or magic men who designed a machine to do it. See, everything that he just stated there, even if it was completely 100% true, that's not evidence that it's a design or there is a designer. It would only be evidence of the fact that we don't completely understand the process in which these things happen, in which case we would go about finding more and try to come to the most reasonable conclusion based on actual evidence. For example, paleontologists can examine fossils and find that the older and older fossils are, the simpler and simpler the organisms are. So it would be safe to assume that organisms became more and more complex. Or do we have mischievous programmers who put that in our reality to try to mess with us, to try to come to rational conclusions based on that?
Whether it's in school or on TV, the majority of the information that is being passed on to you is biased and compromised.
Well, not if it's actually scientific information, because science, real science, goes against our bias. It actively fights against it. It actively tries to overcome the shortcomings of our minds. Science is the best tool that we have for finding out about reality, for coming to the best explanations.
In part 2 of this series, we talked a little about the dark side of the Matrix. And it is this dark side of the Matrix that is controlling the majority of the information that you're getting these days. It's not just the news that's inaccurate, it's the textbooks as well. Evil has one goal in mind, to sell you the illusion of truth. It says what is good is evil and what is evil is good. The further you are from understanding what is really going on in this world, the better it is for evil. And so evil will stop at nothing from corrupting your perception of reality.
Okay, don't believe anything that contradicts you and believe you instead. Okay, got it. I'm sure that works out for everybody who takes that sort of mindset.
They're not just lying to you about 9/11 and Iraq and GMOs and the...
Oh, good lord, let's try to skip to a point.
That is why I say to you, if you want to understand the Matrix, if you want to understand our constructed reality, then you need to start looking in places that talk about this reality as a constructed reality. That means creation, folks. Genesis 1, chapter 1.
Okay, so the world is obviously constructed. So the only true information we're going to find is from sources that say that reality is constructed. Even though we believe it's a computer simulation, it's completely 100% rational to first go to religions that have a creation myth. because that's sort of connected, almost. And what makes you go to Genesis in particular? Why don't you go to Upanishads? Why don't you go to the Quran? Why do you choose this religion in particular to be the one to go to find out about this fabricated reality in a way that isn't accurate to the fabricated reality that you believe in?
Now, some of you are going to be like, oh, hold on there. I know exactly where you're going with this. Listen, friends, I'm being scientific about this. I'm telling you to be methodical. Be scientific. Question everything.
Oh, right. You're being scientific now by giving just blatant straw men of scientific concepts that contradict your straw men of scientific concepts. And then saying, don't believe science at all. Instead, believe religions with a creation myth, but question everything. But don't believe science, but question everything. If you really questioned everything, then you would look into the initial singularity. If you really questioned everything, then you would look into chemical abiogenesis. But you didn't, because you're not questioning these things, you are rejecting these things.
Every physicist, every mathematician is telling you the exact same thing here. The universe looks created. It looks like a program governed by equations.
They're not actually saying this. The people who are educated in science understand the concept of the Big Bang and understand Darwinian evolution. They're not saying that at all.
And it's not just physicists, it's chemists, it's geneticists, and you want to know why they're saying that? It's because what they're seeing in the DNA, in the physics equations, in the chemical reactions, it's about a reality governed by rules and equations.
It's not governed by rules. It's not governed by equations. But instead, it works in a certain way. And science finds out about that ways. And it uses equations to describe what's going on. The universe doesn't use these equations. We make these equations to better understand the universe. And that's what we were talking about earlier. Remember the clip with Neil deGrasse Tyson? This was the point. The universe isn't made up of equations. We make up the equations.
And I suppose I should begin by reiterating an important theme of the Bible here. Our world was custom made, and it's all we know for sure. We don't have a clue about what's really going on beyond our planet. We have no idea how long we've been on this planet for sure, or how many quote-unquote Earths are actually out there. All we know is that we're here now, and we've been given a handbook on how to conduct ourselves.
Actually, we have loads of handbooks on how to conduct ourselves. Hinduism has texts, Buddhism has texts, Jainism has texts, Judaism has texts, Christianity has texts, Islam has texts, Sikhism has texts, Mormonism has texts, Scientology has texts, hell, Jediism has texts. How do I know that this isn't the handbook given to us by our computational overlords? How do I know that it's your Bible?
Our world is much more mysterious and complicated than we give it credit for. If you look at the moon, for example, that may be one of the most mysterious phenomenons that you can freely observe. You may have noticed that it fits perfectly in between us and the sun. This fact alone tells you the moon didn't just end up that way by chance. The fact that it fits right in between us and the sun perfectly is just another statistical impossibility.
What does that even mean? The moon fits perfectly in between us and the sun? The moon orbits us. That's all it really needs to do. It fits perfectly for what?
So that means the moon didn't just get there, it was put there, just like the Bible says. Now, another mysterious aspect about the moon that you may not appreciate is that the moon doesn't ever rotate. Not really. It rotates just enough so that the front of it is always facing us. I mean, what are the chances of that? And what are the chances that the moon would look like a face looking at us? Have you ever thought to yourself, well, hey, maybe the moon isn't what we think it is? Well, you might be onto something there, my friend. The moon didn't just get there. It was brought there.
Okay, Google. How did the moon become tidally locked?
According to Universe Today, over time, the Earth's gravity slowed down the rotation speed of the moon until it stopped, forever. This same process happened on all the large moons in the solar system. Because of its smaller mass, our moon became tidally locked to the Earth billions of years ago.
So there it is, a simple Google search, and it comes right up. The moon is affected by Earth's gravity. Now, I don't know the exact details as to how that works, but there's your answer. But what would be the point of placing a moon tidally locked to the Earth? Are aliens spying on us?
Moving on. Our world is full of mysterious clues like the moon, but it really only starts making sense if you understand what this reality is really about.
Yeah, that's true. Once you actually become scientifically literate, things start making sense. But if you're completely ignorant of science and create straw men of science, then yeah, you're not gonna understand it one bit.
Start looking up instead of looking down. It's as if there's something else that's falling to Earth during nightfall. It isn't just darkness. Pay attention to it. I'm not sure what it is that's raining down with darkness at night, but my guess is that it began its journey at dusk on the other side of the planet.
What? What are you going on about now?
Now you gotta be careful there. Not only will you start noticing that people have different types of auras, but you'll also notice that metallic objects such as planes and helicopters have different types of auras as well. I think most of you have probably already noticed that one by now.
So we need to start looking at the auras of inanimate objects. Okay, I'm done here. Like, comment, and subscribe now.